What's up, guys, and welcome back to the ArchiTech Network podcast. Today, we're continuing on the theme of BIM 2.0 and this new race for the next generation of AEC software. And today, we're going to have Paul O'Carroll on, who is the CEO and founder of Arcol. If you haven't heard about Arcol before, they are one of the big players in this BIM 2.0 space, an early mover, an innovator. Their one-liner is that they want to become the Figma of the AEC space. They're trying to become a place for collaboration, not only for architects, for you to collaborate internally, but also externally with developers, maybe even contractors, engineers, as a place where everyone can come and look at a model, create drawings, documents, and basically streamline the process from concept design all the way through to construction. Like many of the BIM 2.0 platforms, Arcol are based in the cloud. It's highly collaborative. Like I said, they're trying to become the Figma of the AEC space. They're also focusing on the early stage feasibility stages with ambitions to kind of go all the way through the design stages to construction documentation. So we're going to be talking to Paul about all of these things, how they got started, the origin stories of Arcol, what they're building now and what they aim to build in the future. And of course, his journey as an entrepreneur, raising initial funding for this and to where they are today. As always, if you like this episode, give us a like and a subscribe. The more people that join our channel, the bigger the guests we can get on. So thank you for the support so far. But without any further ado, let's jump into it and have a chat with Paul. All right, Paul, that's it. We're live. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. As I mentioned just before we start recording, this is my first day back after pat leave. So if I look a little bit disheveled and bags under my eyes, it's because I've been dealing with a newborn for the last couple of weeks. But I'm excited.
You've been dealing with two newborns, a physical one and a digital one, I guess.
Well, there you go. Apparently, somehow, I think it was Martin Day was telling people that I was having twins. So a lot of people I've met recently were like, "Oh, I heard you had twins." Martin told me. I was like, "Nope, feels like twins, but I've only had one baby."
Yeah, well, congrats on the baby and congrats on what you're doing with Arcol.
Appreciate it.
And I think it's like I've said in many of the podcasts, it's a great time to have you on because it feels like there's a lot of excitement about BIM 2.0. Like we released that video recently and there's clearly a lot of interest in what you guys are all doing. So we definitely want to get you guys on to hear a bit about your story, the founder story of starting Arcol. So yeah, let's jump into it. I know we met virtually like 2020 or 21, something like that.
Super
I
early
remember,
21, yeah.
yeah, I remember you doing early calls, like, what would you want from a new BIM 2.0 platform? And I remember meeting you and I was just like, wow, that would be mad if, they're able to actually build something. And here we are 5 years later and you just closed, did you just close a round of funding, was it? No,
We
sorry,
haven't.
you just launched the product, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we launched the product 2 months ago into GA. I'll talk a little bit through the product history, and then we also raised a round of financing, which we've not announced yet, last summer. Raised our first kind of pretty big round of financing.
Yeah, amazing. But talk a little bit to the people about your background. So I kind of got the impression you had this other endeavor, which was called Blindfold Studios, before. How did you get into the world of BIM? I know there's a connection with your dad, right? He was into BIM. Yeah, give us a little bit of the origin stories.
Yeah, maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into it. So the TLDR is, I grew up in Ireland. My dad's an architect, so I pretty much grew up in construction. A lot of my kind of earliest memories are a kid is like him taking me out of school and going on to job sites and spending my weekends with him in his office. And as a kid, I really thought that construction just felt like the most like fucking magical industry in the entire world. I would see my dad take his ideas, put them on a piece of pen and paper, and then months later see that a physical manifestation of his creativity kind of in the real world. And more importantly, I got to like meet the people. This was someone's home that he was building. And so as a kid, I just felt that construction was just mind-blowingly incredible, and I wanted to find a way to try and work in it. And so again, I was a kid. I went through school. I dropped out of school as a kid because I was running my last business, which was called Blindfold. Effectively, we were a digital design studio, so we would build kind of design tools for large companies. How that started is I started programming as a kid. I got into game development using a tool called Unity. Unity kind of early on when I started was starting to kind of say, it feels like we've topped out the game space. Let's look at where we can apply effectively a rendering engine to all these different verticals. And so they're spending a lot of time in AEC. They released a product, I think like 2020 or so, called Unity Reflect, which was like a crappy BIM viewer. Like didn't really, I think they've kind of
Right.
other AEC stuff,
I
but that
remember that.
took me down the path of like, hey, this kind of quote unquote skills I built about being a Unity developer, I could like apply to more interesting stuff. And so I was a freelancer. I was again a kid. I was like 15 or 16. But I'd be taking these like non-game development like gigs of building a rendering pipeline or building a basic viewer application for something. It was around that time that I like left. I decided to leave school. Part of the justification for me leaving school is my mother said, "I don't want you sitting at home all day, so go leave the house." My dad was like, "I can give you a desk in the office that I work in." So I start working in an architect's office and kind of start mingling two of my passions, which I felt like was construction and kind of design technology, and built stuff like early viewer solutions for architecture. And it was around that time that I realized, hey, what I thought was this magical, beautiful, incredibly efficient industry as a kid fucking sucks. Like, you guys don't really know how technology works.
Yeah.
More importantly, your core authoring tool, it's 20 plus years old. And to me, it felt like it was holding back the industry. Like people were passing these gigantic Revit files on USB sticks. And so at the time, kind of the idea was, what if it felt like a core problem in the industry as the industry was becoming more complex and global, was that your authoring tool needed to be natively in the cloud. And tools like Google Docs are becoming pretty standard. And so kind of the idea was, well, what if you had a Google Docs style environment for architecture? Um, didn't end up pursuing it because Autodesk is a $60 billion plus public company. And I thought, who's some kid in Ireland? Surely they'll go figure it out at some point. Built blindfold, realized, hey, I want to go do this, and saw the evolution tools like Figma and decided to go pursue Arcol. That's the very, very trying to
Yeah.
be quick whistle stop tour. We can dive into pieces of it.
So when you're back as a Unity kind of developer, those little projects, were you doing stuff for architects, or was that like more game engineer? It was like any kind of industry, or
Yeah, in the beginning it was all game development stuff.
okay,
We did like not a bunch of actual AEC specific things, but what we would do is tools that kind of had an AEC twist in tech. So an example here is we built a effectively like a retail design tool, a retail store design tool for a very large Asian technology kind of corporation. It wouldn't take a long time to guess who it is. They had a pretty big retail presence, and they realized like, hey, why are we working with these architects using AutoCAD? We're effectively just refreshing our stores based off this modular set of furniture. We want a tool to give designers at our company that's growing just to be able to visualize the space and plunk in some kind of furniture stuff. And so we built that very basic tool for them. It kicked out kind of crappy construction style docs that they could give to an architect of record and a local construction company to get working. So that's the kind of style of, it wasn't for architects, but it was really kind of in that architecture vein.
that's super interesting. I've talked to a couple people that have started in a similar way. They end up making these weird tools specifically for people, and then they kind of it grows into a tool. So that's really interesting. Pitch to us today. How would you pitch Arcol? What is the elevator pitch? What is Arcol doing? How does it solve a problem? How do you see it differentiating to the rest of the BIM 2.0 crowd?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think maybe we can start getting a little bit spicy and kind of debating some of the, like, I think most of BIM 2.0 stuff is kind of just marketing bullshit, and, it's still very early. I think there's two ways for me at least to think about Arcol. There's like today, the problem that we solve for users today, and then there's long term the impact that we want to have on the industry. So let me kind of go start to
Yeah,
finish.
yeah,
Today we've started at this kind of early concept and feasibility stage. And I think one of the core problems that we think we're solving at this stage is that that stage of the design process is incredibly important. As an architect, you have to get your design vision to an owner as quickly as possible. It's your job to go and win that bid. Yet to do that today, you're using 45 different tools, from Miro for early brainstorming through to some sort of modeling tool like SketchUp or Revit. Then you're using Excel to build your kind of pro forma to give the architect or the owner numbers. And then you're wrapping all that stuff together in a presentation in InDesign. More importantly, the way you're presenting your design is you're emailing PDF to somebody or a kind of PowerPoint. And so what we think we solve today is that we're a far more holistic design tool, meaning you can go from selecting a site and kind of mood boarding at the very early stage all the way through to actually creating the presentation directly in Arcol. And so as an architect, you got one single source of truth that's entirely connected through that design process. And when you're working with an owner, you're not just handing them a PDF at the end of the design process. You can collaborate far earlier. And that collaboration piece of real-time collaboration is a really important part of how we see the long-term of this industry. So let me go from kind of today to where we see the industry being. I think, when I started Arcol, the idea was super simple. It was like, what if you rethought our authoring tools with the cloud, with intelligence, and with collaboration at its core? Like, what actually could the industry look like if our workflows weren't so siloed and you actually imagine a far more collaborative industry? And so that's one of the ways we think about the long term of this industry is like, we want to build a collaborative design tool from feasibility all the way through to construction documentation. And a platform where all of those stakeholders can collaborate together, from owners and architects and GCs and engineers and subs through to the finance department who's going to underwrite this deal, through to eventually, potentially, if it's a multifamily deal, tenants who are going to review and kind of look at apartments. And that kind of infrastructure of the entire authoring suite with real-time collaboration is a really, really core piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys, I kind of classified as like, you're very broad in that you will try and create a platform that can do from concept to construction, which is quite, that's the holy grail that we're all kind of wishing for, is this one platform. So I think that's very interesting. Let's touch on so you mentioned like at the moment you're focusing on sort of the feasibility stage, right? Where does that come from? Does that come from literally that's where we start in the design process? It makes sense to start there rather than work your way backwards from construction drawings. Was it a business case? I feel like maybe the business side is driving that. Like, why the focus on feasibility initially?
Yeah, so I think it plays into, what you just pointed out is like there's two things here. It's very clear in the BIM 2.0 movement that people want a better authoring space. So people want you to kill Revit, quote unquote. And all these platforms, it seems like, want to go own all of that authoring environment because there's an immense value capture to be done there. The question is, how do you do that? It's a big piece of product to go and build. How do you kind of sequence the product so that the business actually makes sense? The way we think about our product strategy to go and get there is we effectively break down our kind of product roadmap into the design process today. And so you can kind of high level think of this as like concept, feasibility, SD, DD, and CD. I know the kind of REBA stages are slightly different, but at least in AIA terms, that's kind of rough documentation output. And the reason why we think about that in that way is because as a user or as a software vendor, you got to convince your user that you can give them 1,000x better experience. And it's really hard to give a user 1,000x better experience if you're not aligning the outcome of your product with a thing they get value from, meaning they get paid when they release documentation sets. Let's help them release documentation sets. Now, you can argue that the future looks very different when a lot of this documentation becomes different, and can totally debate that for a very long time. So that's what we think about our product is start a concept and feasibility, and you slice off more and more of the design process aligned against documentation. That's how we think about displacing Revit in the long term. Now, the important question you asked there is why feasibility? Why not start a construction doc and move backwards? And this is a thing that we spend a really long time trying to figure out. Again, we've been building this company for like 4 years or so now and kind of laying the early foundations of the product. And some of our thinking as to why we feel like that's the right spot is a couple of things. One, it is the earliest part of the design process. And so you can make an argument that if you want to own all of the design process, starting at the beginning is just a good wedge into these firms. Maybe the more interesting kind of dynamic piece here is from what we've talked to in all of our kind of early research and talking to customers, and like I said, you guys are one of them that we talked to in the early days, that early concept feasibility stage, you're moving so fucking fast, designers can just kind of choose whatever tool they want. And so if you're a designer come from Rhino, you go model it in Rhino. If you come from SketchUp, you do it in SketchUp. If you want to do it entirely in PowerPoint, go do it entirely in PowerPoint. Because there's no rigorous documentation process. It's just telling a story to a client. And so if that's true, we don't need to align to some ISO standard or kind of BIM management internal process. We just got to convince designers we can help them do their job faster. Whereas if you start a construction documentation, you have to, there's just such a higher bar of feature sets required to be the construction documentation tool. That's some of the reasons, which is like, we think we can provide a 1,000x better experience, and kind of designers can kind of choose whatever tool they want to. And we feel like this is our wedge into these firms that we work.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Do you see, my only hesitation with the feasibility side is like, is it a challenge to balance freedom with some kind of automation or speeding things up? Because on one hand, the feasibility stage is where architects can make a crazy, like make a movement, a shape, an idea that is what really adds their value. Um, at the same time, it's hard to automate. Like, how do you give people the freedom to play with things, but automate that? Do you find that a challenge? And, will you see maybe architects use it, but also maybe developers come in and they actually maybe do this initial feasibility because it's actually quite easy for them to maybe to try?
Yeah, so before we get into kind of automation versus design, what you just touched on is really important, which is like, is this for architects? Is it for
Yeah.
developers? Care about the owners? To come back to like the value we do in the short term and how we think the long term about this space, I talk a lot about collaboration. And, we talk about it on our website, and we coined the term originally Figma for BIM. What that means to me, at least, is like, if you're successful in the long term at building a collaborative authoring environment, what you've really done as a business is effectively monetize collaboration. And what Figma for BIM means is, like, Figma as a tool. Again, architects may not be super familiar with it, but you're kind of in the tech sphere. I think we're somewhat familiar with Figma, at least as a product. Figma is not just for designers today. It is a tool for the marketing team, the sales dev team, biz dev, product. Everybody collaborates on product design. And that is because it's built as an authoring environment from the beginning. And so if we apply that to the early stage today, we don't just view Arcol as a design tool for architects. It is a tool for the owner to receive the information they care about, for general contractors to do early estimating if they care about it, for developers to do early work. Like, Arcol is not just a design tool for designers, it's all of those people. And our kind of long-term view of this market is, if we're successful, this market explodes because you get to monetize all of those. Now, to your question about, like, is architects used by the architect or developer, we see a pretty wide gap today. Most of our users are in the architecture sphere, usually in North America, but we work with a bunch of large general contractors. We work with some large developers, work with a handful of owners, but mostly it's in the architecture sphere. The automation versus design stuff. Do I want to be an asshole? No, I'm not going to be an asshole yet. We're early. We
No,
haven't
be an
actually.
asshole.
I don't need to get too spicy. I had a debate recently with another AEC founder who blocked me on LinkedIn. That's a spicy.
I
Um,
promise I won't block you.
Good, good. Look, I think the automation versus design piece versus kind of like freedom of design really feels very biased as to, like, if you're building a design tool, you think design is more important. If you're building an automation tool first, you think automation is more important. What we care about is can that architect get to the point of presenting a design to an owner as quickly as possible? And whether you automate that process or whether you're design driven first dramatically depends on the typology and the type of project you're going after. And so, like, if you're doing a data center, it's entirely automated. There's very little design criterion there. It's like,
Yeah,
does
yeah,
this deal make sense? If you're doing multifamily, it depends. It's like, kind of low end multifamily is just fully automated. Give me an ugly, Texas donut with some colors on it, and that's what I'll present. If you're doing a crazy curvy tower in Asia for a massive client, design really matters. We aspire for Arcol to not have strong opinions on automation versus design, but for Arcol to be a authoring tool where designers can get to the point of presenting their ideas as quickly as possible. Arcol is really a communication tool. Now, if you look at the product today, it is majority your design first. There's very little automation in the product today. It's like relatively easy to layer on stuff like floor plan generation based off kind of unit mixes and kind of some egress criteria. That's not an incredibly difficult product to go and build. What we care about when we go and do that is, like, does it help that designer get to the point of presenting that idea to the owner as quickly as possible? On the opposite side, we're building what we think is this actually really cool Rhino integration. So firms that do the crazy curvy towers with complex facades at early stages can import that model, actually stream it directly into Arcol, and you can cut up floor plans directly in Arcol and make presentations. You get the data you care about, you make floor plans, you make presentations. And so in that way, Arcol is kind of your companion to a kind of very design heavy environment like Rhino. Again, we don't very
okay.
opinions. It's a communication tool, really, to some degree.
Yeah, I like that you get freedom to play with the tools you're familiar with, particularly Rhino. I mean, the video we literally just reached is why Rhino is king,
Rhino's
and I
great.
think architects love Rhino, and I think, yeah, playing with that, and eventually, you may kind of take it over, or take some of those users across. But I think that's quite interesting. Definitely the point on, yeah, like if you're designing a data center, like 90% of architecture is pretty repeatable, and maybe even 99, and these projects that you see in the background are like the 1%, if that, where they do go crazy. So, I think it's a really fair point. A data center, yeah, to script and automate the shit out of it. Uh, Something more designery, just give them flexibility to bring that in.
I think one of the pieces of automation that I do get more excited by than what seems like most of the like automated feasibility tools today do is like very deeply automating constructability as early as possible. Um, and that is a thing that we as a product organization get really excited by. So that is what you'll probably see us do more of. Less, here's a site, go dump a donut that has this Unimix on it. That is just a product sphere that's, I don't think, very like kind of interesting. We'll do it, and it's like we got to do it for a lot of typologies we work on, but I don't think it dramatically changes how our industry works. I think if you can automate constructability in the very early stages and be able to go to an owner and give them far more confidence in this building at by just drawing a square, that to me is like the industry looks dramatically different. And there's a lot of foundational pieces we need to get there. Like, for example, you need to involve your GC early as possible. And to do that, you need collaboration. Collaboration is really fucking hard to do well. So like there's foundational pieces before we go and do some of the more interesting automation stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I'm definitely learning is BIM 2.0, for lack of a better term, is extremely hard to build, right?
It's not easy. It's not
No.
easy. It's expensive. You're competing against a very big incumbent who makes a lot of cash from it. It's now a space where people are really excited by. It's not an easy product or company to go and build, but it's really fucking important.
Yeah. One thing I like to double click in is maybe a little bit of the tech behind it. Now, I'm a tech guy, but I'm not a developer, and I'm very curious about like what you guys are building this on. Since you're a Unity guy, are you building this on Unity in some way? Is that involved? How does the modeling kernels work? Do you guys use modeling kernels? Do you find people are building their own? I get the impression that's incredibly difficult. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about what is Arcol built on.
Yeah, we're a pretty standard web stack. I made the really big mistake in the very beginning of Arcol of thinking we can leapfrog a lot of the tech by building on top of Unity. There's a very good story there about why that was a terrible idea. So we're kind of pretty standard web tech. I think we own a lot, as much of the infrastructure as we can. So an example here is like we didn't go and license a geometry kernel like Parasolid. We're building our own. There's lots of reasons as to why we think that's important. Um, Stuff like the collaboration kind of infrastructure. So how does real-time collaboration actually work? We're fortunate that, again, I mentioned the term like Figma for BIM in the beginning. Dylan Field, who's the CEO of Figma, is one of our earliest investors. We've been super fortunate to get to hire a bunch of very early Figma engineers. And the reason why it's important is Figma like was kind of the company to figure this out, to do real-time collaboration properly. And so we feel like as a company, we're just best positioned to go and do that because we have the talent who was literally in the room when it happened at Figma. So we're a pretty standard web stack, and we own as much of the infrastructure as we physically can.
And you're building your own kernel, right?
Yes, sir.
That's quite cool. That's a big undertaking, right? I mean, again, I vaguely understand the kernel idea, but that's quite. It's interesting because I think I was talking to someone the other day, and I looked at the tools that architects are adopting at the moment. Rhino, Revit, etc. They're all built on their own kernels, right?
Hmm.
And so there seemed to be a trend there, and I was curious, like, why are some building their own, so why are some not? So yeah, I think it's quite interesting you're building.
Yeah, it's look, I don't want to make it out like we're like our geometry kernel is equivalent to something like Parasolid. Like that is a really long, hard thing to go and build. And if we come back to like the product strategy we think about here, we really just have to build the geometry operations you care about at a space like feasibility. And so, when we look at the product sphere, it's like, we could go and build all the geometry infrastructure and operations to allow you to go build the crazy, curvy, parametric shit you can in Rhino, or we could just like very deeply partner with the kind of the ecosystem and integrate with Rhino and do the things that we think we can do really well, really well. And then as we move deeper into the design phase, it's like layering on more and more of the infrastructure that we build and exposing that in the product. So I don't want to make it out like we've effectively built Power Solid. We are
Yeah.
0.1% of the way there.
No, but I think still interesting that that's the road you're going down.
Yep. Yeah, there's lots of reasons as to why we decided that path, but that's the path we chose.
Yeah. Very cool. Let me just, I've lost my notes here. One second. Um, maybe talk about who do you find adopting it initially at the moment? Like you mentioned architects, there's like
Yeah.
some contractors and stuff like that. Do you find a trend already? Is it kind of big firms, medium firms, small firms? Like what kind of architecture they do? Who do you see really adopting Arcol so far?
Yeah, in the startup world, this is called your ICP or your ideal customer profile. We think about that today as a 50 to 500 person practice in North America. Those are kind of you would define as like the medium to smallish large firms, like the bottom end of large firms. And there's lots of reasons as to why that's a good ICP. One of them, for example, is at the really large end of firms, some of these problems you face at feasibility, you've probably built a bunch of crappy Rhino scripts to do pulling data out of Rhino. You've glommed together some kind of process to make it work at feasibility. And we find we go and talk to those firms, like clearly Arcol's a 1000x better experience, but not only are we trying to convince the designers, we're trying to convince the computational designers who built these scripts that we're better. And it's like we just feel like we're competing against an internal process when we go and sell the product. Now, again, we launch into GA, and so we see a lot of self-serve usage at these large firms too. But when we see a 50 to 500 person logo come in, we know we can sell to them pretty quickly and easily. And then the others that I mentioned that we're experimenting with and that we just find very exciting is the really large general contractors. And the reason why the really large general contractors is exciting is because this trend playing out of more and more of the industry verticalizing over time. I think you will see a lot of these larger kind of owners and general contractors and engineering firms start to buy up big architecture practices and build their own design service in-house. And those teams that are doing that kind of have the luxury of sitting there saying, if we were to rethink our stack, what would it look like?
Yeah,
And so we
yeah,
see a lot of these like design build teams or just designers in these large general contractors who are ripping through feasibility processes, really want to start using Arcol.
yeah,
We're also lucky here because Tui, the CEO of Procore, is one of our earliest investors, and so there's like a very nice, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of playing out here, where you can imagine a very deep integration into something like Procore that does some of this early constructability analysis based off their past projects. So there's really exciting stuff that plays out with the GCs that we get excited about.
yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think you could definitely see those bigger firms, especially GCs though, when they're, in a GC, you get plots come through your door so often, and you just, you know, quickly kind of how many houses or whatever can you fit onto it, and so that's quite interesting. I could totally see feasibility in the GC side coming through.
Yeah. And even like one of the other pieces there is that even GCs that don't have design teams in-house, we see a lot of them that are like GCs by incentive, they want to get involved as early as possible in the design process because the earlier they offer value to the owner, the more likely they are to be chosen as the GC. And so you can kind of like, I talked about this a while ago, it was like the evolution of pre-construction was originally kind of coming into early CD to kind of help fix a lot of things that would be rework issues when it goes on site. Kind of the GC's going, you guys are fucking this up, let us help you earlier. And we're seeing pre-construction just pulled earlier and earlier and earlier. And the evolution of that is that an architect or an owner will kind of say, we're going to work with this architect to do a feasibility study and let's get some costing estimates from a GC. So we have as much confidence in the beginning as to whether this deal is going to pencil out for us or not. And that's on a kind of a build to rent kind of project. You can think about that as. And so those GCs are also figuring out ways to be able to collaborate as early as possible with the architect and the owner. And hey, that is the whole thing that Arcol is built for. And so what we see also is architects inviting general contractors into the design process as early as possible. And so there are two ways that GCs get pulled in. Again, they own the design service, they actually want to do design. And the upside, they're getting pulled in by the design team to give early estimates and kind of very, very basic pre-construction services.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Um, let's touch on the landscape of BIM 2.0. Obviously, it's a very busy. You got a lot of colleagues, let's call them, or competitors in some way.
Dickheads, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think some of you guys seem to be converging, like in similar spaces. Others are narrowing down on floor plans and stuff like that. What's your view? Is there any that you see taking quite an interesting route? How do you see that you kind of what makes Arcol unique with the others? You've definitely got a cohort in New York, right? There's you, Snaptrude, Hyper. I think that's it in New York. I remember in the Pechacucha, you guys we were trying to work out time zones and stuff like that. But yeah, how do you guys fit into this landscape?
Well, first, I know I mentioned that I just came back off pat leave, and part of that was we had to move apartment so we could have room for a baby. Before I moved, I actually lived in the same apartment as Altaf, the CEO of Snaptrude. So not only were we like in New
I
York,
was thinking
the same
you.
apartment,
I was just going to ask, are you in Midtown? Because I knew they were in Midtown, and I
which is
was like, you
really
must
quite
be
crazy.
close.
It's kind of a very weird coincidence. Um, Look, I think this is the same for every single startup. You're going to have competitors. My view is like, I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Our job is not to think about what we do better than competitors. Our job is to deliver as much value to our users and our customers as possible. So I can rant and give you lots of strong opinions on what I think all these companies are doing right and wrong. As CEO of Arcol, my time is better spent thinking about how we give better value to our customers and our owners. Um, I think you're right that a lot of these companies are kind of converging, it feels like, on this very early phase of design. All right, let's give you a spicy take. It seems like you're a Pokemon. My feeling here is that if you reason through why these companies are converging, I think it has more to do with seeing other people be successful and less with first principles reasoning, like I pointed out in the beginning. I don't think that every company sat down and went through the reasoning I just kind of outlaid to you and said, let's start a feasibility. I think there are companies that were building a Revit killer, didn't get a lot of traction, and then had to figure out like, fuck, where do we focus? What's our niche? And saw other companies like Arcol be successful in their niche and just went and copied. That is a strategy as a company. It's not one I would build a company with. Um, so that's, I think, part of the reason why a lot of these companies are converging is somebody finds success, the others kind of glom on and try and get there too.
Yeah, because you guys were one of the early movers in this space, right?
Yeah, I mean, we
Arcol.
wrote a manifesto 4 years ago. We wrote early kind of blog posts about like, here's why we're starting here. Here's some very strong product principles we believe in. And an example here is we built what we called boards really early. We actually originally called them spaces, and that was a terrible product name because we heard our users saying like, yeah, just jump into the spaces space. And it's like, ah, fuck, that doesn't really work. It's like too
That's
many
right.
spaces. So we called it boards in the beginning. I was very strongly against that word, but Mike fought for it, so we went with it. And the idea behind boards was kind of, as I outlaid, our product strategy is to align to documentation. And so documentation is a really important part of how we think about the future of Arcol. Whether that documentation becomes more automated or not, the very basic idea of conveying your ideas in 2D is important. Then what we thought was like, we saw the evolution of a COVID of tools like Miro and these whiteboarding tools being really super heavily adopted into firms. And we kind of thought very super, super early, like, what if these two ideas merged? What if you had a infinite canvas style space, but you can actually have documentation in here too? And so your documentation could be more mood boardy, storytelling style, but also very structured sheets with views and title blocks if you wanted it. That was a piece of product that we wrote in our blog post before we even built the piece of product. And we were like, this is something we believe in, we think it very strongly. And now you see a lot of the BIM 2.0 movement do almost the exact same thing. And so like this is look, our job is to build product that helps users win more work and be efficient in their job. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about competitors.
It's a good mentality to have. Keep focused, keep innovating. It sounds like you guys are iterating a lot, which I think is really good. Like, yeah, just the name of things, you can spend like half a day arguing spaces over boards, and then you hear someone get, "Oh, let's jump into the space inside the space." And
And I'm really still bummed about it, but really
I
thought
know
it'd be
exactly, I know exactly what you mean. You're like this. No, they're not gonna like this thing. They're gonna like this thing, and then
yeah.
they go the complete opposite way.
Again, like I said, me and Mike debated it for a long time, and we're like, what if we just call it spaces? And then it was on a customer call where we heard them say we want to jump into the spaces space, and me and Mike looked at each other and we're like, fuck, there goes that name. We had other ones I don't even remember now, but boards is what we ended up on.
Why also did you kind of end up in New York, right? Because I think, did you start this in Ireland or were you in New York at the time? Or why not
Yeah,
come to London? Why New York?
it's my Irish nature. I can't step foot in England without my blood boiling.
I was,
Um,
I was,
come on,
go-
and I
I
have
was
to do it.
joking if that was the reason.
You have to do it. Come on, you left the door open. Yeah, look, I think so. Yes, I was in Ireland when I started the company. We raised our pre-seed round. So we raised a pre-seed, a seed, and a Series A. And maybe in another question we can jump through financing and how I thought about it. So we raised the pre-seed peak of 2021, and I did it remotely in Ireland. Um, One of the things that was really clear is if you want to build a generational company, it feels like you're just at a disadvantage if you're doing that not near the talent pool do you want to access. And so it was like, well, if that's true, we got to move to the States. And so myself, my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend, came to America for the very first time. We spent 6 weeks in America as like, never been here before, but clearly we're going to move here. Let's spend some time. We went to New York, went to Austin because around that time Austin was blowing up as everyone was moving there.
Of
And
course.
we went to LA, which is a terrible idea. But this is also around a time where San Francisco was apparently going to die and no one was going to live there. And I came here and fell in love with the city, and we decided this is where we want to be. I think the other factor here is I look at my window onto, I can see where KPF is. If I look down the Empire State Building, I can see where Corgan is. Like this is the architecture hub really of the world. And so it just helps being really close to your customers too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I would argue London is the capital, then Copenhagen and New York, but you're definitely in the hub. I'm obviously biased. I'm a little bit jealous. There's not that many BIM 2.0 companies here. There's a couple guys from Motif, but
Yeah,
there's
Greg
Conic.
Motif is there, right? Conic is over in Belgium,
Yeah.
right? Belgium.
Well, Motif are technically San Francisco. They're like in Silicon Valley. I think Conic are the only ones that are semi-based here. But then they're Belgium as well. So yeah, I'm missing out on the physical BIM 2.0 interaction. Um, let's touch on a last bit of the tech side, which is of course AI. I think what must have been interesting is you started a little bit before the kind of consumer AI boom, right? Of the Mid-Journeys, Diffusion, LLMs, all this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And I've seen like some of the tools, not even in the BIM 2.0, but in the AEC space, they were doing this thing with coding. Then AI come about, they still do it, but it's now AI powered. And it's really hard to decipher who's actually using AI. But how are you guys been integrating it into Arcol? What's your thoughts on it? Like, yeah, take us through Arcol and AI.
Yeah, so one of the ways that I talked about Arcol in our pre-seed deck, I'll try to dig it up and share it with you, is that Arcol is a web-based collaborative intelligent authoring tool. And the example I would give when I talk to investors and customers was I remember being in the office with my dad when I first started working there, and they had an intern join, and the intern's job was like to route some HVAC pipes. And it's like, my dad was like, go off and spend the week and come back to me and show me the project. And the intern came back. My dad was like, it's a really good use of Revit. You've routed those pipes correctly. But the issue is the guy on site like can't bend his body around this column to put this screw in, and so like this isn't gonna work. And you only know that because he had 30 years of on-site construction experience as well as architecture. And it just felt very logical that if you think about the future of our authoring space, it feels like constructability intelligence that is like built into the authoring tool saves a lot of rework down the line. That was the like product pitch, not necessarily some kind of piece of technology we had built. It just felt very logical. Now you saw the explosion of LLMs and diffusion models, and I think that still feels very true that you should have deep intelligence built into your authoring environment. I think one of the more specific takes we have is that we talk about this a little bit in our next dev talk. Maybe this is controversial, but I think if you play out the next 5 or 10 years of our industry, it feels like it's not a 0% chance that there's actually more agents in our industry than there is people in our industry. And what I mean by that is like, you could imagine a business model change being a general contractor, instead of offering pre-construction services, their Turner Construction's pre-construction agent joins your Arcol file and applies their project data and does some reasoning based off the project and gives you some kind of outcome. Like, your grid line is off by X, or your cost should be Y, or hey, we think there's a risk in timeline because of this, parapet you've done. And that feels like that's actually an interesting business model for Turner, because you're tapping into labor budgets. And if that's true, the companies that will capture the value there are companies and authoring tools that are built with collaboration first. Because at the end of the day, agents are effectively just collaborators. Whether it's a person behind the keyboard or an agent, it doesn't really matter. You have to be able to collaborate and do stuff simultaneously. And so one of our very strong takes outside of you can type a prompt in and you get a fully CD done building, which I don't exactly know is very interesting or true, is that I think you'll see agentic first construction companies and services being offered. And those could be offered by software vendors or by a marketplace built on top of those software vendors. And that is something we get really excited by, that we want to start building more product against. And so that's one of our takes on AI, is that the agentic future in architecture and in AEC feels really super logical. And
that's a very interesting concept. Yeah.
The reason why I'm pointing that out, and not just the typical LLMs are going to change everything, you can type a prompt and give it a building. That just feels lazy. It just feels like, I don't know exactly if that's how the future is going to play out. I think there's lots of pieces that play out like that. But I don't imagine architects as a whole, as an industry, being gone and everything is built by an LLM and a robot on site. That just doesn't feel very real to me. What does feel very tangible and real is this idea of agents kind of exploding in the industry.
That's a very interesting concept. Like that, a company like Turner, they have all this knowledge and information they sit on. They're not going to give that to someone for free to make as a LLM or train their own model. So make their own, and they can charge a fee for that. And you're working in Arcol, and you can pop up, I'd like to download the Turner agent into it, and he's like, the little agent is like, this is totally unbuildable, you idiot. This cantilever is going to cost you 10x here. And that's a really interesting concept. And I think then when you start to think about Archol as like a platform for all this collaboration, that gets really interesting. I haven't heard that take before.
And it's why we talk a lot about collaboration, how important we think it is. It's not just like a crappy, stupid buzzword that, hey, our industry should collaborate more. I actually think if you built the technology to allow people to collaborate more, I just think there's an explosion of really interesting shit that happens. And you can touch on the agent stuff, or you can touch on how the GC is getting involved earlier and how I think that changes a lot of the industry. But yeah, I agree. I think the agentic stuff, and I don't know, you can imagine a world where bidding works in a very similar way, where you can get bids done in 5 seconds. How much more efficient would the industry be? And more importantly, the general contractors offering those bids have immense value or kind of confidence in those, because it's leveraging all of their historical data. And the value to general contractors is less about scale, or maybe it's even less about specific expertise in a typology, and it's more about the data they have. It's not we're an expert in hospitality. It's we've done 500 of these projects. We know how they work. And that it's really cool. It's an exciting future.
Yeah, I like that concept. I think the closest, remember we just did a podcast with Rob from Giraffe, and he was talking about a similar concept of a platform where you can basically leverage all these different people, scripts, agents, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really interesting concept. But the idea that these firms create their own agents and then can, charge for the agent's time, that's really interesting. That kind of opens up a lot of ideas in my mind.
Yep. Again, that's why I said I think it's controversial. I don't know if that's how the industry plays out. I actually haven't even talked to a bunch of general contractors about that concept, but I think
it makes a lot of sense.
What's the bear case? Why don't you think that works?
I don't think that it would work, but well, I guess the only reason why wouldn't that work is I think only companies would just be hesitant, wouldn't it? And they'd be like, oh, why would I? The AI is going to steal my data, and Zuckerberg and Sam Altman are going to run away with all my secrets, all this kind of stuff. But I don't, if you do it right, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle the industry has to face is the passing of responsibility and liability. And I actually don't know if that's surmountable or not, but for it to really work, you have to actually trust the agents to go and autonomously make decisions for you. Now, I think in the very beginning of what this looks like, I guess again, I think this vision is like a multi-decade thing that plays out. But in the very beginning, you entrust the agent to something very small, like do an estimate for this project and then send it to our estimator to approve it. And estimators are able to 100 estimated projects are estimating because they're just approving and they're kind of they're giving a human eye on it. But at some point, you got to trust the estimating agent to go and give an estimate that an owner is going to sign a contract based off of. And yeah, I don't know. This is like if the general contractor owns that agent, is the liability onto the general contractor? How do contracts in our industry play out if that's the case? Like that is
Yeah,
maybe the only thing I've heard that argues against it.
but I guess they sort of take that responsibility on anyway. And yeah, estimators are a good example because they're usually wrong anyway, so you can't get much wrong.
Well, that's good. Yeah, good point. Good point.
That's a very good example. Um, let's put the business hat on and just I'd love to hear a bit more about the story as an entrepreneur and how, some things that you've learned over time. And maybe talk us through that starting point of, yeah, what was that early pre-seed and seed, and I forget what exact series you're on now, but yeah, walk us through the entrepreneurial side.
So let's go back to 2021. January, the beginning of 2021, decided it was really actually the end of 2020. I decided I want to go and do this. It wasn't clear to me whether I like spun it out of blindfold or whether I did it under blindfold. And again, 2019, blindfold was a pretty successful kind of services business. I decided towards the end of 2019 that I felt like I wanted to go and do this, so let's step away. 2020 happened, and I realized like, hey, I can't just very easily step away from this business because it actually is all relationship based. And when a global pandemic happens, it turns out all these people want to talk to the CEO, not the product manager or project manager. So decided, let's just get blindfold through this. Let's wind down contracts and let's close the shop. And then 2020, going into 2021, I made the decision to go and actually start the company. This is what I was going to spend all my time on. And to start it, I did what we just did effectively. I had conversations with architects and said, tell me where I'm wrong. Like, this is how I think the future plays out. Here's what I think the issue is. The open letter had come out towards the end of 2020. As far as I know, was it August 2020?
Yeah, that was 2020 sometime.
And so I kind of had this backing to say like, hey, look, you guys have these frustrations. Like, what do you actually want? And I know the open specification came out a couple of years ago, and that was kind of what I was trying to get at. It felt like what I thought was going to happen was that all these architecture firms said, you're so stupid. Here's this project that Autodesk is working on that you don't know about. To my surprise, everyone said, fucking hell yeah, go do it. We want it. And so through that, we got some LOIs from large firms that said, look, if you do this, we'll sign X number of seats and here's how much we'll pay. And we also had built a wait list. So I had realized that for us to really work, this had to be a bottoms-up movement within the industry. I couldn't just go convince the Corgans and HOKs and Genslers and Perkins and Wills of the world, because there's the long tail of architecture firms. And we didn't have the marketing dollars or resources of Autodesk to spend time working with these large firms. So to test the virality of the idea, I was like, what if I just put up a website that said Figma for BIM, a like collaborative authoring environment or whatever, I forget what the website said, with an email address box so you can put in your email address to join the quote unquote wait list.
Yeah.
That exploded and we got like 6,000 people who signed up for the wait list. Keep in mind, it's just me in Ireland kind of wanting to go start this company. And so I had LOIs from firms. We had a wait list. We had no product, no team, no real very strong opinions of where the wedge was or where we started or how we think we got there. And I went to go raise financing. At the time, I didn't realize that 2021 was the peak of venture capital. And I thought it was really hard to raise money. It turned out that's the easiest it ever was to raise money. I did a bunch of investor calls, learned how to didn't even know what venture capital meant before that. We were lucky to raise our pre-seed from an incredible firm called Cowboy Ventures. The founder of Cowboy, Aileen, she coined the term unicorn. So this kind of term we talk about in startup land of unicorn, she coined the term years ago in a TechCrunch article. Kind of one of the preeminent kind of seed venture capital firms in the Valley. And in that pre-seed round, I got to meet incredible people like Dylan Field, who invested, and we raised them from some other angels. I got a DM from Tui Cordemonch, who, for those who don't know, is the CEO of Procore. And I remember getting it in my girlfriend's house. We were sitting there and I was like, Tui just texted me on LinkedIn. This is so weird. And double clicked on his profile to make sure I wasn't getting scammed. But the text was like, "Hey Paul, love what you're doing. Heard about it through my chief of staff. Don't know if you're fundraising, but would love to put some money in." We had closed the round. I had closed the round. I was hiring. I called Ted, our board partner at Cowboy. I said, like, "What do I do?" Ted said, "You're stupid. Get him on the phone as quickly as possible and get some fucking money from him." Got on the call, and me and Tui chatted for like an hour about what we thought the future of the industry looked like, and he invested. He's one of my favorite people in the entire world. Tui is awesome. And then so from there, we hired the early team. We built some very early product, and then at the end of 2021, we start getting a bunch of people saying, "Look, you did your pre-seed. You got Dylan Field. Do you want more money? Do you want a seed round?" I went to our board partner at Cowboy. I said, "Hey, we're getting some interest for a seed round. Would you guys want to do it?" Phrase was something like, "Whatever terms you want, we want to do it. Just like, let me know what terms." We kind of figured out what terms of the round would look like. It was actually Tui's advice, is part of the reason why the company is still alive. I called Tui. I said, "Hey, like, what should I do?" And Tui's advice was, "Paul, I think the markets are going to crash. If you can get cash, get some cash." Now, the markets crashed in November 2021 and everything went tits up. And if we didn't raise that seed round based off Tui's advice, Arcol would be dead because we wouldn't have been able to raise the seed round. We closed the seed round, and then we spent a very long time building the early product and figuring out where we sat in. And that's when we started releasing some of this kind of product or blog posts around product. And we built early product and we built this beta. And then early last year, we started charging users and turned on monetization. And then we raised our Series A last summer. That's the whistle stop. There's shitloads to jump into.
So how much have you raised to date?
We've raised about $20 million to date. We haven't publicly announced our Series A. Do I want to say this? Yes. It is an exciting time to be at Arcol. Venture capitalists are very excited by the story that we're trying to take on and the product that we're building and the traction we've gotten. And so we will be raising more soon, is my answer. And the next round of financing is your Series B, and that's a pretty large round. But to date, we've raised about $20 million.
That's incredible. Great story. What's been your biggest learning curves?
Oh, man.
Yeah, like if someone's like, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a software company in the AEC space," would you tell them to? Or
This is one of my like part-time hobbies that I really like doing is spending time with founders who are thinking about starting companies or who are starting companies, specifically in AEC, because I just feel like this industry needs more stuff. And I feel like there's learnings from hiring to product strategy to like customer insights that I've gotten to fundraising that I think I can help some of these people with. And so I spend as much time as I can with them. One of the things I tell lots of people is don't take money from AEC specific investors, which I did a blog post or a LinkedIn post on a while ago. Maybe we can chat about why that doesn't work or doesn't make sense. I think that my biggest piece of advice, like besides some of the tactical pieces about how to think about venture capital or how important hiring incredible talent is the first thing I say to these people when I start the call is I like very blankly look them in the face and I say, "You should not start this company." And you learn an awful lot from an entrepreneur as to whether they go, "Oh shit, really? Do you think so?" Or whether they kind of go, "No, fuck you, I'm going to do this. With or without your advice, I'm going to start this company." And the people who say, "Fuck you, with or without your advice, I'm going to go do this," are the people who should do it. And the people who get swayed or scared by me saying you shouldn't do this, they shouldn't start a company. Because it's not easy. It's really hard. You have imposter syndrome all the time. You don't think you're doing the right thing. It's like very easy for me to sit here and go, "Yeah, we raised a pre-seed and a seed and a Series A and everything's incredible." It did not feel incredible, nor do I feel kind of incredibly incredible where Arcol is today. Because that's your job as CEO. It's like you're constantly unsure about your decisions. There's a lot of things you got to go figure out. It's fucking hard. And if you don't have the self-confidence to say, "Fuck all the people who don't believe in me, I'm going to make this happen in the world," don't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard challenge. You got BIM 2.0 and the world that I've just been in, modular. I feel like that's the two biggest AEC challenges at the moment. So you've got a huge one, but you seem to be doing really well. So congrats on where you've taken it. It's an incredible journey so far. Talk to people where I know you just publicly released Arcol, right, a few months ago. Where can people go and access it? Do they pay? Can they trial it? How can they get in touch? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been selling the product for right now about 18 months with pretty good success. And so we decided to launch a self-serve tier 2 months ago. So that means that you can literally go to arcol.io, sign up for your free account, and you'll get a 2-week free trial. Arcol today is you can either choose to go back to your free plan, which there's some limitations on, or you pay $100 a month and you maintain Arcol access. One of the cool things about the paid tier is you get unlimited free collaborators. And so if you're an architect who wants to collaborate with their owner, you don't pay for that owner. That owner is entirely free. So you go to arcol.io and sign up for a free trial. That's what I'd recommend. I also would love people like my wife will now spend pretty much all of my time on email or LinkedIn, and it's partly because I want to talk to as many users and customers as possible. I feel like the risk to companies as they scale is that leadership loses kind of touch with what's actually happening on the ground and just makes these very high level strategic decisions without any reality backing them up. And so I want to spend as much as my time as I can talking to users. So feel free to email me at paul@arcol.io, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. We love some product feedback. I want to hear it.
Yeah, that's great. So reach out to Paul. I'll put the link to everything in the description below. Is there anything on the horizon people should be looking at? It sounds like you just released it. So you're kind of in development mode to continue to develop the product. But is there anything specific people should look out for?
Yeah, there's one of the big things we're spending a lot of time on right now is our Rhino integration, and we think that's going to be pretty interesting when we release it. And really, you'll be able to like stream a model directly into Arcol, cut it into floor plans, get the data you care about, and make presentations. And so, if you're a user who spends all of their time in Rhino but hates using the shitload of Grasshopper scripts you got to use to get data and doing floor plans in AutoCAD and making presentations in InDesign, we've got some cool stuff cooking for you that I think you'll find really interesting.
Okay, exciting. When is there a timeline? When could we get our hands on it? Or we just got to stay tuned.
Soon is my answer. We're releasing some stuff to some early beta testers pretty soon. We're working with McNeil a little bit on it to help us build some of the stuff. It is a really big area that we're investing into. When we actually like release it so anybody can start using it, to be honest, I don't know yet. We don't know. We'll go through the beta program with the early users. But if you want to try it and get access to it and give us some feedback, you can try it today.
Very cool. Well, stay tuned. I'd love to give it a go once it's ready. But yeah, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been another really good one. Like I feel every time I talk to one of the founders of these amazing companies, I feel like I learn a lot more. So yeah, this has been really good. Congrats on where you got today. Congrats on the baby, and all the best for the future.
Appreciate it. It was great chatting. Appreciate time.
All right, cheers.